What's up YouTube? Dale here from Zephyr, and today, also being the live stream, and it will come out as a pre-recorded video tomorrow, we're going to take a look back at all of the products for 2025. Now, the only products that I'm not going to be looking at will be OTS packs. We're not going to be looking at like accessories, and we're not going to be looking at Retro Pack 2 or the World Championship packs, because I think that they are quite unique in what they're trying to offer. And the whole idea is that we're going to go through 5 different criteria on how we're going to rank these particular products. So if we start off with the first product of 2025, that was, of course, Supreme Darkness. Now, as you can see, the 5 points here is going to be the meta relevance of the set, the value for your money, the overall support that it gets. But this will be double-sided because in decks or in kind of like set building sets like Maze of Master, Battles of Legends sometimes, Phantom Revenge, Justice Hunters, you're not really getting support for existing archetypes. You're just getting reprints. So I think that it will be support or reprint value. Then we'll talk about new player appeal, and then we'll talk about overall collector value. So were the quarter centuries or the Starlight Rares worth picking up? Were they appealing to the individual players? Like, would there be future investment in those particular type of cards? So starting off with Supreme Darkness. Now, Supreme Darkness, if I remember correctly, and I do have them in front of me, came out on the 23rd of January, so it was the first set of the year. This set introduced us to some new evil hero monsters. It also introduced us to Speedroids and, of course, Crystons alongside Argostar. But on top of all of that, it was the first set that introduced us to Mitsurugis. So I'm just going to get the card list up right now in front of me. But the idea is that you've got a relatively balanced overall for the current, like, for every type of player. So it's a good one that started it off for the pure fact that not only did it give us meta relevance in a brand new TCG exclusives being the Mitsurugis, but it also gave us some very nice legacy support for like evil heroes. It gave us some speed, some fiend support. It also gave us the Speedroid Fiend support. It gave us I'm trying to remember exactly what else it was off the top of my head. Evil Heroes, as I've already mentioned. So overall, it was a fairly decent set. And for some reason, classic, the DB Yu-Gi-Oh is currently down, which is always great. Let's see if I can find the card set elsewhere. I mean, looking back at it now, Crystron's is actually... I mean, Crystron's got some insane support, which is really, really good. How have I found? There we go. Always can rely on Dual Daddy. It's very, very good with their stuff. Okay, so as this loads up, the idea is we're going to talk about the overall set, the meta relevance, like how it changed the meta, how it changed the current things that were going on. Keeping in mind, like, Forbidden and Limited List pop in and out throughout the entire time as well, and kind of go from there. So let's take a look at what it kind of brought us to. So it had some Azamina support, Snake Eye support, Fiendsmith support, Gladiator Beast support, Tenyi support as well, backed up with, it introduced us to Eclipse Twins, which is actually quite meta relevant for Raizio at the time. And then introducing us to Mitsurugis, it gave us Ether Beryl for the Primite engine. And like we said, for the Crystons, it gave us Incursion, it gave us Tristanos, and it also gave us Solfador as well. So overall, really, really good set. So this is the example I'm going to move over to for you now. You can kind of see here. So meta relevance, I thought it was A star. And the reason it was not at the time it was probably like left a little bit to be desired. But if we're looking at the products right here, right now, and you look back at this, the fact that this introduced us to Mitsurugis, which have been utilized with Raziel, it's been utilized with Yummies, it could be utilized pure as well. Like, this set overall for that meta relevance was insane. You take into account, it also gave us Molchomi Meows, it gave us the Ether Beryl, so when the Primites were at their peak, that helped them out massively as well. It also gave us the Sylvie Azamina, so for White Forest it took them up a notch. So it kind of gives, when you look at those decks as they currently stand right now, like you would 100%, the Estella is a staple. Primite Ether Beryl is a staple. Eclipse Twin in Raziel back at the time was a staple. So it actually gave like a lot of really, really good meta relevant supports. Value for money, when you look at this now, trying to look at like the secret rares and the ultra rares. So Primate Ether Beryl is still a very expensive card, like £20 a copy for an ultra rare, even though it's already had a secret rare reprint. A Bower Q, I think, is a really kind of cool card, not that it's huge values of money. But you've also got Clockwork Knight. Eclipse Twin was a fairly decent super rare to get a hold of. And then you've got the Mitsurugi Ritual. The value in it right now will probably be a little bit less for the pure fact that the Mitsurugi Ritual is confirmed as a reprint in the brand new legendary decks, or like the competitive decks, so to speak. And then on top of that as well, when you look at the quarter centuries, the ones that would probably maintain value in here is you've got the hero cards. So the heroes got Toxic Bubble Man, they got a Prisma, Evil Hero Prisma, and then they got a Fusion Monster. All came as quarter century secret rares. I believe, I don't think this was the last set for quarter centuries. No, I think Alliance Insight was. But still, like, quarter centuries will gain value over time. It also gave us Mermail support as well, which really did kind of tick the deck over a bit more. So as meta relevance, really, really good. Value for money, I feel it's relatively average. I'm not saying it was bad, but you actually could get a decent amount of value here, because when you look at like the ultra rares and the secret rares, half of them were fairly decent. Overall support, the fact that you look at Evil Hero support was really, really good. As I've already mentioned, Ether Beryl, Mermail Atlanteans, Speedroid support. The Tenyi's got a Synchro monster and a brand new level 4 monster. Gladiator Beast got a step 1. Like, it didn't... The support it provided wasn't meta, but the support that it covered for all of those decks were actually really, really good bits of support. Generic Machine support with the Clockwork Knight, generic Fiend support with the Abawa Q. It kind of covered all of that. Now, for new player appeal, I feel that core sets are always going to be average, because I don't feel that a new player really comes into a core set unless it's the start of something new. So with Supreme Darkness, it's actually quite a good one to start with, for the pure fact that it is the first one that introduced us to the Mitsurugis. So when we're first getting introduced to the Mitsurugis, it's kind of like, right, well, if you get in at ground zero, you can pick those cards up, and if you want to stick with them, change them up, do whatever you need to, you're in a very, very good position. So new player appeal is always going to be pretty average. And then collector's value. The reason I think collector's value is half decent in this one is because Primate Ether Beryl will always maintain value, in my opinion. I can't imagine a time where it ever goes low. It also provided with hero support. Like, when I'm talking about collector value, I'm talking about like the quarter centuries themselves. So it gave us free hero cards, and heroes are always a deck that a lot of people are drawn to. It has a lot of nostalgia to it as well, so that will always kind of maintain a bit of value. All it really needs is for those cards to become like more relative, and you'll get the value will maintain and stick. So overall, for value for money, pretty decent. Or like collector's value as well is pretty decent, because if you've got the hero cards, there's something that you can kind of stick on. You got Ether Beryl as well. Like, a lot of these, if people out there are doing a master collection of sets like this, having those quarter centuries are going to be fairly decent. Some will plummet in value when you look at stuff like the Tenyis and the Glad Beast, but all it takes is for the Tenyis to become meta relevant, and those cards rocket through the roof. And kind of the same could be said about Meows as well. Like, if every other Molchami, Perulia, and Fuelos were hit or limited or whatever, then the Meows will start to take center stage, which is really kind of cool. So let's move on to our second product. So the second product we're going to be talking about is, of course, going to be the Blue Eyes White Destiny. So this was the first structure deck of the year, and I believe it was the first structure deck we received since Fire Kings. Now, again, when you see this one, so number 1, meta relevance, number 2, value for money, number 3, reprints and support, number 4, new player appeal, and then collector value. Spoiler, new player appeal is always going to be a lot higher with structure decks like this, because it gives you nearly everything you need. So let's look at the overall ratings I've kind of personally put down together here. Meta relevance, when it first came out, and when you include the Primate package that we previously got, it was a meta contender. Blue Eyes were top in events. Like, no doubt about it, it was a massive meta contender you got just from this structure deck, and then it became even better when you added the Primates in. Value for money. Now, when you're looking at value for money on decks like this, I always consider the reprints as well. So that's kind of where it works. It works its best, because the reprints were absolutely insane. Like, you ended up getting Nibiru. You also got Hieratic Seals. You got all of the Blue Eyes cards that you could possibly need. Like, the only thing it didn't have was like Primate cards, but you know, what could you really expect from something like that? It also gave us a Fet Veiler as well, which is really, really kind of cool. And then when you look at the reprints and support, like the general support as well, was really, really good. So getting the brand new Maiden, which is something you play free of in it. The Neo Kaiser Seahorse is give or take at 1, 2, or 3. Wishes of Eyes of Blue is a free of. Then you add on to that the Blue Eyes Spirit Ultimate Dragon. Again, an absolute staple. You definitely play one of those. And then some people play Indigo Eyes or not. New player appeal, I think this is absolutely, it's S tier. Like, not only does it have a nostalgia of people going, oh, I grew up with Blue Eyes back in the day, this is amazing and is very, very attractive, but it also then has its competitive value so that someone can come into it. It's very simplistic to learn. They come into the game, they're like, oh, it's Blue Eyes, I like dragons, I like the way this works. I feel that when you look at all of the other stuff we have here, for new player appeal, as an overall deck, this was probably and arguably the best product for new players over the entire year. So if you're a new player and you're like, oh, I really want to get into Yu-Gi-Oh, what do I want to get? There's a couple of stuff that came out this year that you could definitely look at. But if you were to tell me which you could only have one, what would it be? I would be pushing you towards the Blue Eyes White Destiny structure deck because it just had so much to it. And then finally looking at collector's value, like if you wanted to keep sealed product, if you want to keep the Blue Eyes White Destiny deck sealed, I think there's some value in that. But what made this stand out above the rest for a collector's point of view is that it gave you quarter century secret rare upgrades for the new cards in the Blue Eyes deck. So if you are a collector that wants to have the shiniest Blue Eyes cards around, you're going to have a lot of value in it. You can also get upgrades from ultra rare to secret rare. So it wasn't giving you anything that you couldn't already get access to if you just brought the structure deck. If you were like, you weren't kind of like gate kept. It wasn't like, hey, you have to pull a quarter century of this card to be able to use it or play it. It was like, hey, if you just want to buy the structure, that's great. Here's a little bit of an extra benefit. You're going to get a promo, so it will look extra shiny. And if you get the extra shiny one, you can make a little bit of value back on it as well. So value for money, absolutely insane. The reprints, the access to it, just everything about it. The fact that it was playable out of the box. You could put 3 of these together and the deck would be playable. You would need to make some hybrids, whether it be with Bystials or whether it be with the Primites to take it up a level. But the deck overall was absolutely insane. The fact that it involved Infinite Impermanence, Nibiru, Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, and then it gave you all the starters you could need for your Blue Eyes as well, alongside Call by the Grave, and pretty much a full extra deck. Like, you had everything you could imagine from this, which is absolutely insane. Let's move on to the next product. So the next product we're going to be talking about is going to be the Maze of the Master. Now, the Maze sets have kind of become this kind of the staple of the year. Like, we're getting a new one in 2026 as well. A really, really good set at the time, but it wasn't like meta defining or meta kind of breaking. Now, when you look back on it, you're probably going to think again for the pure fact that it introduced us to the Odeons. And the Odeons are like insanely powerful right now in Genesis. It also gave us access to Galaxy support, 7th Tachyon, which is massive in Genesis right now. And I'm hoping that that's going to get a reprint next year. It's mad to think that that set hasn't even been out for a year yet, but maybe we'll see that 7th Tachyon getting reprinted, maybe in Rarity Collection 5. You don't know. It also gave us Ancient Gear support in the Ancient Gear statue. It gave us Gimmick Puppet support technically as well. And then it did have some kind of cool reprints like Thunder Dragon Hawk, Thunder Dragon Thunder Dragon Raw. It had the Sword Soul reprints, and it also reprinted Mulchummy Perulia alongside the Crystron Halifibrax, Herald of the Orange Light, and Gladiator Beast. So it reprinted stuff that was kind of needed for the new support that had just been received in Supreme Darkness, and kind of built on from there. So overall, where do we rank this? Well, overall, for like the meta relevance, like none of these decks, bar probably the Odeon, are played right now in the current meta. And even then, Odeon is probably considered as like a rogue style deck. So if you're comparing it to Alliance Insight, it wasn't Mitsurugi, so it's not that level. But it was still kind of good with what it wants to do, and it does lend itself to both Modern and Genesis. Just keeping in mind that at the time, Genesis wasn't really a thing. Value for money, I think it was pretty average on the value for money. This was a set that was made up with rares, ultra rares, and collector rares. So it really kind of came down to what you were trying to get from this. Like, the higher rarity cards weren't anything crazy that broke the bank. There wasn't anything that was that wildly expensive. Like, Man with the Mark was still kind of cool, but even then you pick them up for like £10 a copy. I think the most expensive card right now is 7th Tachyon, and that was something that was, I don't even think it was a staple for the Ryziel deck itself. Like, it wasn't, I have to have this card in Ryziel, or Ryziel are unplayable. It was like, if you have it, you can play it and it will be quite useful for you. Overall reprints and support, again, pretty average. It didn't really support anything apart from like generic cards like the 7th Tachyon and the Galaxy Tachyons, and then the Union monsters, like the Y head, I think it's like the X Cannon head. Those were all kind of cool, but they weren't, again, taking decks like meta relevant. They were just kind of nice casual support, which is really good. And then when you look at the reprints, again, the reprints, apart from Mulchummy Perulia, was very specific. It was very specific to the Sword Soul strategy. It was great for the Crystron Quandrax at that particular time. It was good for the Gladiator Beast, whether you want to be playing these particular Gladiator Beasts in... the Gladiator Beasts in Genesis, or whether you were playing them in like Modern because of the new support. It was fairly decent. New player appeal, I don't think it was that bad for a new player appeal if you were interested by the new cards. Now, what I mean by that is if you're a new player and you're like, I just want to build Odeon, this could be very, very appealing for you. But if you wanted to play like the Galaxies, or if you wanted to play the Union deck, you would have to have already had the previous support. If you wanted to play Gladiator Beast, it was nice to kind of get those reprinted around. And if you wanted to play Sword Souls or Crystons, it was like the last pieces that you needed. But if you was a new player coming back and Maze of the Master was the first set in front of you, you'd probably always get pushed back to the Blue Eyes one in that sense. And then collector's value is pretty average on this one as well. Because the highest thing you could get was collector rares. Yes, it's nice if you wanted a collector rare Perulia, but then if you're a max, like if you're the higher end type of collector, you're probably going to already have a quarter century secret rare Perulia, so that wasn't massively appealing for you. That being said, they probably all should be like C level. I think like Maze and Master is probably better on C, but I feel that, you know, need player appeal and collector value is a little bit higher than the reprint support and then your overall value for money. Moving into the quarter century secret rare set of the year. Now, this was a bit of a bumper set. This was crazy. So this is quarter century Stampede. Now, the biggest issue with the quarter century sets, and this isn't a dig or anything, but the issue you're always going to have is that quarter century 1, like the Rarity Collection 1, was so good. Like, unbelievably good. It was always going to be nearly impossible to one-up it. However, what quarter century Stampede did is it gave you unique artworks that hadn't been seen for cards like Blue Eyes White Dragon and Dark Magician, but then it also provided alternative artworks for Black Rose Dragon. It also provided alternative artworks, I believe in this one, was for Cartasia, for Albaz, Diabell Star, like loads of really kind of cool alternative artworks. But then on top of that, it also reprinted Mulchummy Fuelos and Fiendsmith Engraver, which were really, really big components. It also reprinted Nibiru, the Primal Being, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. So again, you've got another Ghost Ogre, Ghost Mourner, Effect Veiler alternative artworks. So you've got like another wave of good reprinted support. So, quarter century Stampede, let's have a look at this. As a set, it's not going to be meta relevant because none of these cards are new. All you're doing is upgrading how they look, okay? So, meta relevant is always going to be average. The only meta relevance you're going to have here is that the cards are a little bit easier to come by that were meta staples. Value for money. Value for money is wild in sets like these for the pure fact that every pack is always foil. If you got a quarter century secret rare, your value would, of course, nearly quadruple. If you got one of the alternative art quarter century secret rares, again, your value would go up. Like, at the time when it was at relatively its lowest, like a Cartasia, I believe, was something like £60. I think an Aluba was like £40 as well. Now, they're going to go up in price, but you kind of get the idea that there was crazy amounts of value in them in order to get what you needed to. Reprints were insane. Obviously, not going to be anywhere near as good as Rarity Collection 1. That's just a fact. Like, that's never going to happen. But the fact that you got Ghost Ogre, as I've already mentioned, Ghost Mourner, Mulchummy Fuelos, Fiendsmith Engraver. Yes, there were some bits missing. I'm not going to deny that. But when you're trying to take them as kind of like individual pieces, you've got the Danger Sukanoko reprint, which had recently just been upgraded from the Forbidden Limited list. You've got Alistair the Invoker. Ash Blossom was already mentioned. Destiny Hero in Dusted Gold. Nibiru the Primal Being. You then got some XZs in the form of a Divine Arsenal AA Zeus, Sky Slayer Typhoon. You got alternative arts for Sky Strikers, Access Code Talker, Called by the Grave, Part of the Extravagance, Lightning Storm as well. They were all really good. And that kind of leads us from reprints into new player appeal. I always think that quarter century sets are always good for new players. Again, just because of the range of reprints that it provides, it does give you easier access to particular staples that you might want to get access to. But if this comes out and you're coming back into the game around the time a structure deck is released, you're probably going to lend yourself to a structure deck a lot more because they will be guaranteed. But if you want to upgrade some of them and get a foil from a common, this is a good option for you. And then we look at collector value. I think collector value in this is absolutely insane, because if you hold some of the alternative artworks, the one thing that I say is that it's very rare that an alternative artwork gets reprinted. Now, I can't think of, I think there's like a couple of rare alternative artworks that I know that have been reprinted, and I believe they all came in the Legendary 5Ds decks, and that's where it was like the alternative art for Tuning was reprinted, the alternative artwork for Junk Synchron was reprinted, Junk Warrior was reprinted. So other than that, when you're looking at overall value, like Access Code's alternative artwork, Zeus's alternative artwork, Nibiru, Effect Valar, Albaz, Cartasia, Aluba, Ecclesia, all the Dark Magician alternative, like different artworks of Dark Magician, different artworks for Blue Eye, different artworks of Dark Magician Girl. Like as an overall collector, it's very, very appealing, and it kind of ticks a lot of boxes. It also gave us upgrades for stuff like Hero Lives and Marsh Change as well. You've got the main pool, and then you've got the nostalgia pool. So it really does tick a lot of boxes for both things. And I think that Quarter Century Stampede is one of them sets that really is appealing to players, because you also got alternative artworks for Sky Striker Ace Ray, Hayate. Kagari was in one of the, not Kagari, sorry, Shizuka was in one of them. I can't remember exactly which one it was off the top of my head, but it was definitely in one of them, to be fair. Okay, so now let's move on to the next core set of the year. And the next core set of the year was Alliance Insight. Now, Alliance Insight being the second core set of the year is always going to be a little bit tricky, because it kind of provides support for what is currently like the top end decks. And it usually provides the first wave of support for the decks that we got in the previous deck building set, which was in December and was not Crossover Breaker. Let me try and find. It was the Malice set. And the Malice set came out in December of 2024. I know it's crazy, like looking back over all these years is absolutely insane. It was Crossover Breakers. So Malice, Ryziel, and Ryugi. Oops. So yeah. Alliance Insight. What did Alliance Insight bring us? Well, it actually brought us at Ignista support for like. It also brought us our second wave of Mitsurugi support, bringing us Habakuri. And if you've been playing the game lately, you know how powerful Habakuri is. It also gave us March Hair. And then it introduced us to the Regenesis, or the Genesis in general. It gave us Shining Sarcophagus support in the form of the Dark Magician Girl's Apprentice. It gave us White Forest support. It also gave us another line of Evil Hero support, alongside Dragon Ruler support, Ancient Fairy Dragon support, a brand new a level 11 Synchro, one piece of Six Samurai support, and Live Twin / Evil Twin support, alongside Argo Stars and everything else in between. So Alliance Insight. Meta relevance. Now, what I mean by this one is, yes, okay, Habakuri does take it up a level, so does maybe Malice in Mirror is arguable. You've got your Axis Code, Ally Code Talker, and then you also got the March Hair. Now, the reason that I'm not putting this as high as Alliance Insight for meta relevance is the pure fact that it's probably more important for the support. I think once you talk about meta relevance, you're probably talking about a set that introduces stuff for the first time. So when we're looking at something like that, we'll probably be looking at like Regenesis. And honestly, the introduction of the Regenesis wasn't like massive. It wasn't like these are going to dominate. It was a really kind of cool sub deck that if you wanted to build, which I did, you'd have a huge amount of fun with. But it wasn't, you know, it didn't define a meta or define a set. Value for money, like I said, with all of the main sets, unless there is a staple card, something like Forbidden Droplet, Triple Tactics Thrust, more Chummy Fualos, like on that level, your value for money is always going to level out. It's always going to come down to how important are the reprints, how important are the new cards in those particular sets as to whether or not you get the most value from your money and how well balanced out are the higher rarity cards. Reprints and support. Supports, this is why it's higher, why it's put at a B tier, is for the pure fact that the support of March Hair and Habakuri are insane. Arguably, that should probably be like an A star, because those two cards alone, for those particular decks, really do take them up a level. New player appeal, again, with all sets like this, new player appeal is always going to be average. It's going to be one of the ones that, if you picked up Alliance Insight, you're going to get new player appeal on this one, because as a new player, you'll continue from Supreme Darkness to Alliance Insight to get the new support. It's not going to be one of them ones that is like, cool, come back into a core set, unless you are picking up the deck for the first time. So as a new player appeal, you'd be looking at decks like mainly Regenesis. I think Regenesis is the only star of an archetype is in this set. Everything else is support of existing stuff. Maybe Dragon Rulers, because we do get reprints a little bit later on. But to get your first wave of support of something, being the only thing in Alliance Insight was the Regenesis. And then collector value, when you look at the quarter century secret rares in this set, the collector value is a little bit off on this one. And what I mean by that is March Air, it's not like a meta relevant cards. I don't think have future value if they are archetype specific. And what I mean by that is if a deck is archetype specific, it's a higher chance that it will get breached on the Forbidden Limited list. Also on top of that as well is if it's archetype specific, archetypes very rarely stay around the meta game. And when a card or a deck stays around the meta game, that's when its value is going to be at its peak. Once a deck is around that element, it hits its peak. And then after that, unless it's a nostalgia card, like Dark Magician, like Blue Eyes, like Heroes, like Synchrons, it's not going to maintain value over time. So when you look at all the quarter century secret rares in this set, they were Regenesis, Backup at Ignista, they were the Shining Sark's Magician Apprentice. You've got your March Air, you've got your Star Ryziel, like all of those cards. Probably the most value ones would be Dragon Rulers, just because they have not so much a competitive, but from back in the day when they were competitive, they have a very good draw and an appeal to players. But overall, it's not going to be something that's going to allow you to rocket your value. So overall, Alliance Insight kind of balances out as a kind of average style set. Nothing too kind of crazy, nothing too kind of wild on that one. Now I'm just checking, keeping in mind, I believe, and I could be very wrong on this, that between Alliance Insight and Duelist Advance, we were supposed to get Battles of Legend, but the Battles of Legend date was delayed for us here in Europe. So it was the 1st of May was Alliance Insight, and then the 3rd of July was Duelist Alliance, which it should have been, I believe, Battles of Legend, but that was delayed until August. So I'm going to talk about Battles of Legend a little bit later on, which will be quite interesting to see. So the next set that we're going to be talking about is the next core set, being the Duelist Advance. Now, Duelist Advance was, again, another very interesting set that we got, because it's another core set. There was no real breather in between it, because usually you get a couple of sets in between core sets and support sets. But we didn't really get that because the Battles of Legend delay made it a little bit harder to kind of manage. I think the other thing to keep in mind with the Duelist Advance as well is I believe that this came out nearly around... I'm pretty sure it came out around about Euros time, give or take. Or national times. It might come out around national time. So, in Duelist Advance, what did we get? Well, we got Go, 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 Ga, 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 Do, Do, Do kind of support. We got Super Quantum support, Monarch support, Psychic support, Lunar Light support. We got introduced to the brand new Lore archetype, being Medius the Pure and the Archmages. We got support for Vanquish Soul and Holly Sue. We got Utopia support technically as well. We also got a brand new exclusive in Valon. We got Sky Striker support. We got a brand new Gorgon Link Free, which has recently started to come back up into relevance. We also got ourselves some Ritual support, and then on top of that we got a brand new TCG exclusive, being the RB. Now with RBs following on from Mitsurugi, it was always going to be a bit of a challenge for that to be on the same level as the Mitsurugis. So let's take a look at these. On meta relevance, pretty average. Nothing changed. It didn't really extend anything. The best thing to come out of here was the Lunar Light support when you're currently looking at it now, and that really takes Lunar Light up to a crazy amount of level. But even then, well, I take that back actually. I take that all back for the pure fact that the Vanquish Soul stuff was crazy. That made that deck meta. Well, maybe the K9s did, but I think if I remember rightly as well, the OCG got K9s before they got the Vanquish Soul stuff, whereas we get the Vanquish Soul stuff before we get the K9 stuff, because the next set, of course, is going to be Justice Hunters, and I'll talk about that once we get through Duelist Advance. So overall meta relevance, as it currently stood, the Vanquish Soul stuff was good, but it needed the K9s to really take it above it. The Sky Striker stuff was good, but it didn't really take it to the next level. Archmages was still being redefined, as you look at it right now, Lunalights, Archmages, and previously to, or prior to the most recent update on the Genesis list, the Go-Go-Go's, Da-Da-Da's, and everything else was really good. So keep in mind as well, the Do-Do-Dos, Go-Go-Go's, and everything went into Ryzeal. It was actually kind of good. So the overall meta relevance was kind of average. There wasn't anything in here that was brand new, getting into it and make it insane, but it was fairly balanced and fairly decent. Value for your money, again, when you're trying to look at what cards you could pull from this set that really gave you like next level investment, getting Sky Striker cards would have given you a bit of investment for just general like nostalgia, because there was a lot of players that grew up or played the Sky Strikers at their most competitive. But that kind of leans itself more into the new support side of this. So the value for money was, again, pretty average on this one, but you'd be getting this set for the support or anything else in between. When you look at the new support, that's where it really starts to shine, because it covered stuff like Lunalights, which already had a fan following. Monarchs already had a fan following. Super Quantals had a fan following. Vanquish Soul did already. It gave us Legendary Kyberman, which is currently right now getting a little bit of hype around it. Gaga, Do-Do-Do support as well. Sky Striker support, like Psychic support. That's when it kind of got its value from it. And that is in the as you can see it from the graph, new support was probably the standout element of this particular set. New player appeal, quite low in my opinion, just because, like I've already mentioned, the biggest appeal of Duelist Advance was the new support. So for new players to come into this, they would have looked at it and gone, oh, I really want to build that. And you go, yeah, cool, you've got to go and get like loads and loads of old school cards. Like Super Quant, you've got to find an entire Super Quant core or a Sky Striker core or everything else in between. So it made it very, very difficult. For collector's value, collector values wasn't so bad. And what I mean by that is you could have got your Sky Striker cards. That obviously does have quite a bit of collector value in it, because Sky Strikers are always going to be a fan following. And you had 2 cards in here that you could have got as a quarter century secret rare. So they would have been very, very appealing for players. On top of that is where you've got Legendary Kyberman, which would have been very, very good for Blue Eyes enthusiasts, alongside Utopia enthusiasts as well. And then Lunalights were all low rarity, so that was actually quite appealing for just general players as well, apart from the Gold Leo. And then when you look at Super Quantals, they were all low rarity. Monarchs could have had a bit of appeal there as well, because they could have got quarter century rares. And then the Archmages themselves, you could have got, I think it's like 1, 2, 3... 4, 5, 6 cards could come as a quarter century secret rare. And then if you got your Holly Sues cheap enough as well, you could have made a decent amount of money off the Holly Sues, because we already knew that Justice Hunters were coming. So because us in the TCG knew what was coming for the Vanquish Soul strategy, you could have picked up Holly Sues pretty decently and then would have been able to really kind of step up their value, because you would have been like, right, that is coming, and go from there as well. Okay, so now let's talk about the probably, and again, quite like the Blue Eyes, in my opinion, as the biggest new player appeal. Let's talk about Justice Hunters. Justice Hunters was probably maybe one of the biggest meta relevance. I'm not even going to hold off on this one. There you go, look. Yummies, Canines, Dracotals. All 3 of those archetypes we received in this set are meta. Whether you want to, like, however you want to go for it at all, they are insane. They are the top ends. If you look at decks that are top 18, more times than not, they will involve either Dracotals, Canines, or Yummies. There is no doubt about it. As a meta-relevant set of the entire year, Justice Hunters is probably the best one. And I've literally just thought about this, that I'm going to put, right at the end of this video, I'm going to put down the best... the product that is the best at each of these categories. So, for example, Justice Hunters, spoiler, is the best for meta relevance. Blue Eyes is the best for new players, and then I'll do the exact same for value for money, reprints and support, and then collector value as well. So you can kind of get everything in between. Value for money wasn't so bad, because I mean, the Dracotals had the most ultra rares. Yummies also had quite... actually, I think Yummies had the most ultra rares. But Canine only had 2 ultra rares, Lupus and Azuna. So they weren't so bad. And then the Yummies at the time, like, if you pulled an ultra rare from this set, you could probably... you'd get double the price of your booster pack back. So that's kind of where it works. I didn't mind that. Reprints... The reprints in this set weren't that great, if I'm being totally honest. Like, none of the reprints in this set of Justice Hunters would have been like... oh, yo, that's insane. The because keep in mind that when Justice Hunters came out, which was the 31st of July, we were close to like the end of the season. And on top of that as well, we were working our way to the start of the new season. So this is when we would have started getting like loads of new, like the reprints. We would have been in the reprint area. And what I mean by that is we would have been in like the Megatin kind of time period. We would have been in the new season time period and Forbidden Limited List time period. So I'm just trying to have a look at some of the reprints here. Like most of the reprints here, I think like the best thing was like a Sky Striker Hornet drones. It was probably the best generic reprint. Maybe King of the Swamp and Cross Sheep, but overall reprints were probably the worst of the entire year. New player appeal, I think this was massive for new player appeals. I think if new player is going to get back into like the game, these are one of the best ways to do it because you get a complete deck, like a deck from the start. And that's kind of where I'm talking about Supreme Darkness and everything else like that, or those sets like that, is if you get in at a core set that is the start of something, it's more appealing for a new player. I still think the best thing for new players is going to be structured decks because that's kind of gives you everything you need to, bar some bits here and there for you to put together. But that's kind of, what you'd be looking for. And then collector value. Collector value is pretty average on this one because this was the first one to come back, if I'm correct in this one, to bring us back Starlights. So this one brought us Starlight Azuna, it brought us Starlight Lupus, it brought us all of the Yummies were in Starlight, I think. And for the Dracotales, the Dracotales came as Gulamel was like a super rare, Ketu was a super rare, but then you had Arfulion, which was ultra rare, collector's rare, Starlight rare. You had Mululu, which was a ultra rare or collector's rare. Feymena, ultra rare, collector's rare, Starlight rare. And then Lucius, which was ultra, collector's, and Starlight. So for collector value, you wouldn't get huge amounts for the pure fact that anyone that wanted max rare would go for the Starlight rares. Anyone that just wanted something shinier than the normal ultra rare would go for collector rares. And then anyone that just wanted to play the deck would go for ultra rares. So when you look at it now, you can pick up a playset of Azuna and a Lupus for like £40 right now. Maybe even £50 at a push. On release, it was like 100 plus. A Yummy deck on release was like 100 plus. Now it's like £50, but you need to get the new support. And we'll talk about that with Doom and Dimensions in a bit. And then Dracotales again, probably like £80 for a core right now. I think I've seen on trade groups and stuff. So it's not really breaking the bank. So let's move on to the delayed set. Now this would be different for America in comparing to Europe. And that is the Battles of Legend Monster Mayhem. Battles of Legend Monster Mayhem introduced us to the first time of seeing the chibi arts here in the TCG, and I believe it was Dark Paladin, Gauze, Blue Eyes White Dragon, Skull Servant, some really good, I'm just going to try and search it now. Really good kind of Element of Hero Nearest as well, I believe was also in there. Mayhem card list. So that was kind of cool. But then on top of that as well, it introduced us to some brand new cards, supports for Gem Knights, for Fables, for Jirax, Magister support, DDD support, Dragon Maid support, Punk support, and Orca support. So for all of those, it was actually really, really kind of good. So when we look at this, meta relevance, for America, it was pretty big. Because Gem Knights were doing stuff, so were Punks, if you consider like Genesis. And so was like Jirax are arguably doing something in the meta when they're mixed with Fire Kings, and then Orcust when they were mixed with like Mitsurugis or I'm trying to think what else they were mixed with, but they did really well. Like one of them won one of the American YCSs. So like meta relevance, it was actually quite relevant for America. It became less so by the time we got them because like Forbidden Limited List had changed, products had changed, and everything else. But it's still very, very good. Value for money, it was definitely worth your value for money because the whole pack was foil. You could have got a Starlight rare. You could have got a chibi artwork. Like, you were getting value in your packs, give or take. Reprints and support. Support was insane. As I've already mentioned, the new cards for the Orcust are insane. DDDs, insane. Like, you play those cards. Gem Knight, you have to play those cards. Necros, you have to play those cards if you're playing Necros. Magister, you'll play those cards. Dragon Mage, you'll play those cards. Punks, the exact same. Jirax, the exact same. It might not be all of the cards that they've given you, but you will play those cards. The new support in here was absolutely a must for those particular type of decks. So those ones were like, you have to play those. And probably for support, this was probably like the best set of the year because it gave so much support to so many decks, covering Genesis and Modern. It was actually just a really good all-round set. New player appeal, I thought was very decent as well because it reprinted all of the Punk cards you needed. It reprinted all of the Fable cards you needed. Didn't reprint all the Necros cards because they were in, I believe, one of the Rarity Collection sets. But it also kind of appealed to, if you wanted to play the sets or the archetype that was being appealed to, which was the Dragon Maids, the Orcust, and the Punks, this is a great appeal for you. It was technically like a deck building set because you could have built those particular decks on their own. So as a new player appeal, pretty decent. Collector value. It gave you prints in chibi artwork, which are never going to be seen for those particular artworks again. I'll be very surprised if those artworks get reprinted. The Starlight Rares that you could have got for the chibi artworks, again, massively important. Not to mention as well that there were special versions, like every Punk card, Orcus card, and Dragon Maid card had a little watermark in their text box. That is unique. That's never going to be seen again. So if you are a collector and you're like, I want one of each of those that is very unique, or I want a set of each of those decks that is unique, you're going to be picking them up. So collector's value, actually very, very decent. So let's move on to probably what is... It used to be considered the biggest product of the year, but I think like as products have been developed, it's kind of been eclipsed. And that is the Megatins of 2025. Now, this was the first time that the Megatins came as two separate... Like you could get them in two different ways. One way was in like a little tuck box, which meant it kind of condensed waste because a lot of people would buy loads and loads of the Megatins and then bin all of the Megatins. Or you could also get the Megatins. The only thing I didn't really like about this product was the fact that the tuck box didn't come with the deck dividers. And I thought the deck dividers like a really nice kind of unique bit for this particular set. But then it did implore you to go and support your local OTS store by buying a physical tin there, but then you could get the condensed version online. So with the Megatins, meta relevance. Now, arguably, maybe the meta relevance isn't so good in this one for the pure fact that... let me just check this out. Megatins 2025 card list. Now, when I say meta relevance with this one, it's all going to be about the reprints. Are the reprints going to be effective for the meta? Are they reprints for the metas? And usually with Megatins like this, it's probably like it's a decent chunk late because all of the cards that could be reprinted in here are already kind of utilized or done. That being said, reprints of SP Little Knight, reprints of Bulldrake, Druid Swarm, and Magnamut. Infinite Impermanence as Starlight Rares. I'll mention those in a minute. Alternative artworks for Raigekis, Harpies, Feather Dusters. Reprints for all of the Exodia cards. Reprints for the Tempire cards. Probably a little bit late for those ones. But Voicer's Voice, Iron Thunder, Dominus Purge, Dominus Impulse, Fiendsmith Tract, Fiendsmith Engraver again, Mulchummy Perulia again. I believe it also reprinted Mulchummy Foolos again. It was quite a good reprinted set. Mementos were reprinted as well, so that's relatively quite good. It also reprinted the Malice cards and the Rise Hill cards. And it also reprinted Primite Lordy Load and Primite Drill Beam. So, for value for money, a Megatin is always going to be quite good because you get free bumper packs. Plus, you would have got either a tin plus the deck dividers or not. But then each one of those packs, you've got a Starlight Rare card. So that's going to look very, very appealing. For a new player coming back into the game as well, that's going to be very, very appealing for you because you're like, cool, I get extra shiny cards, I get reprints. And if you do hit one of the chase cards, being stuff like your Purges, your Impulses, your Lordy Loads or anything like that, you could either keep them and then build around them, or you can get rid of them to get cards in for a deck that you might need. And then collector value. Collector value is pretty average on this one, and what I mean by that one is the collector value probably comes in the Starlight Rares, but these are going to be very, very low cost. Like, they're not going to be crazy expensive. I think, like, the most expensive Starlight Rare at the time of release was something like an SP Little Knight, about £7 a copy. So, if you wanted to, as a collector, you wanted to pick up a playset of SP Little Knights, by all means, go and do so. But cards like these, again, you might not see them in the exact same way come, like, in the future. They might not be printed as a Starlight Rare in the future, so it will maintain a bit of value. If you wanted to have a master set of all the Starlight Rares from this set, you could do. It would look pretty awesome, but it also meant that you could then have future value on them as well. Not going to go, it will go from something like £7 to £10 a card, but it's still like those little small margin as a collector would have been quite worth your while. Overall, I do still think that the Megatins are very, very decent in general. But the issue with the Megatins is that I feel that we have so many good reprint sets throughout the year. So you look at like Rarity Collection, you look at stuff like this year, for example, that we're going to coming up in a minute, like the Fallen and the Virtuous, Legendary 5Ds, like stuff like that. They put so many good cards in there as reprints that it's very, very difficult for the Megatins to still be on the same level, because they've opened up the card pool quite a bit to try and attract more players, and it does make it a little bit more kind of difficult to balance them back around. So let's look at the final core set of the year. The final core set of the year was Doom of Dimensions. So Doom of Dimensions, I've got a bit of a typo here because that shouldn't say reprints, that should say new support. But regardless, Doom of Dimensions. So what did Doom of Dimension bring us in regards to meta relevance? So for meta relevance, it gave us more Charming Meows, it gave us Canine Noroi, it gave us Dracotal Frixel, and then it also gave us like the Radiant Typhoons, which is something that's going to bridge into the future a little bit more as well. It gave us DDDs. You could arguably say that they're like underdog style support, but I'm probably going to put those under the support section than anything else. And again, meta relevance of this one is pretty average, quite like how Alliance Insight was to Supreme Darkness. It made the strongest decks that little bit stronger. The decks that are the strongest decks could still play without those new support cards, so it's not as meta reliant as Justice Hunters, but still pretty damn good. Value for money, pretty decent. Like your Ultra Res and Secret Res in this set were still worth a bit of money, and the Quarter Centuries that we'll talk about a little bit later on have a lot of factors to them. And what I mean by that is the Quarter Centuries are either going to go up in value in the future, as we're starting to see with the Radiant Typhoon cards. They have nostalgia value in the form of the DDD cards, the Black Rose cards, but then it also has value in the form of, again, your competitive cards being the Meows, the Frixels, and the Canine Noroi, not to mention the Dogmatica as well. Then when we're looking at level of support, like the level of support is pretty insane, because, as I've already mentioned, Meows, Frixel, Noroi, and then all the DDD support it got took the deck from being decent to insane. Like it could be a very good underdog rogue deck. The RB cards were good for RBs, not absolutely broken, but fairly decent. And it also gave us true Draco support and a brand new Dominus card. Now, the Dominus card was never going to eclipse its predecessors because the predecessors were just that good, but it's still very, very decent. And overall, the support for the decks that it gave the support to, like technically the Amazonists, if you kind of consider those, was really, really good. Really good. For new player appeal, again, this one's very tricky to get into because the biggest appeal for this one as a new player is if you're interested in Doom Zs or if you're interested in Radiant Typhoons. If you weren't interested in any of those, it wouldn't have been a good way to get into the game. But again, you could have put together like Black Rose for your Genesis style deck if you wanted to, or DDDs as a fan of that one. But I feel that if you're a DDD fan or a Black Rose fan, you're going to be a fan of those from the past. Collector's value. For collector's value, when you're starting to look at like the Quarter Century Secret Rares, or the Starlight Rares you could have got in this set as well. The highest collector value would have been like DDDs because you know they have a bit of a nostalgia following. Everything else apart from that really is format dependent. And what I mean by that is Doomsies are a fun looking deck, but they don't feel that they're ever going to meet their meta peak where the value is crazy amounts of high. The Radiant Typhoons will be at a peak. They're starting to increase in value over time for the pure fact that they're now becoming more competitive thanks to their next wave of support in Burst Protocol, which we get in February. But then also they are very, very good in Genesis format. Like Genesis format's introduction, which happened around this particular period of time, really did shake up the game a little bit because it started to open up these options of, even though a deck isn't that great in Modern right now, it could be amazing in Genesis. And if you want to compete in Genesis, you're probably going to want to get those cards. So it really does have a different level of appeal, which is really, really quite cool. So let's move on to our, not penultimate, but probably a very close contender for product of the year. And that is Fallen and it should be The Virtuous. So I will update that. But the Fallen and the Virtuous. The Chronicle deck, the Fallen and the Virtuous, all foil edition. Now this was the first time that a deck, as I know it, came as all foil. It was like 51 cards, all foil. You got a promo card in there as well. The promo card could be upgraded as a Quarter Century, Starlight Rare. Keep getting caught in the Quarter Centuries because half this year has been Quarter Centuries. Yeah, like I don't need to spend a huge amount of time on this one. So As you can see how top heavy all of these categories are. As a meta relevant deck, it's not massively meta relevant. It's definitely good because Branded is a fairly decent deck in general, but it hasn't made its dent on the current meta as it currently stands. It hasn't shook up the meta. Like when Blue Eyes, the White Destiny structure deck came out, those decks were topping. Right now, Branded aren't topping yet. You could argue that the Fallen and the Virtuous, the quick play spell card from this deck, is a meta relevant card because a lot of people are playing that card, but I still don't think it's enough to tilt the deck to be meta relevant. That being said, let's look at the next three categories because this is where this set really, really does shine. Value for money. Yeah, I believe it was something like 20 quid or £20. And you got, everything was ultra rares. You could get one of your cards upgraded as a secret rare or a starlight rare. And if you hit a starlight rare Fallen and the Virtuous, wow, you'd like quadruple or 5 times your investment of the structure deck. That leads me nicely into the reprints, because the reprints in this deck were insane. You got a full ready-to-play branded structure deck. You then got Nibiru. You got branded fusion in there, pretty standard what you would expect. But you got all of the core pieces. You got Nadir Servant as a very nice... You got Nadir Servant, apologies, as a very nice reprint in there. You got all of the Bystials. Bystial Lubellion, Bystial Saranir, Bystial Magnum, Bystial Druid Swarm. All of those got a reprint, and then the Baldrake that you didn't get had just been reprinted as a Starlight Rare in the most recent Megatins. So the only thing that was like the highlight of that one is Bystial Lubellion getting a reprint. Like, your reprints were absolutely insane, and they were all of a ultra rare rarity, so they're very appealing. That leads me into new player. New player appeal is insane. Quite like with Blue Eyes, you could come back and you would pick up a Chronicles deck Fallen and the Virtuous and be able to play it. That's how appealing it is. You got some very good staples in the deck as well. It was a more complex deck than Blue Eyes. I felt that Blue Eyes would be is a lot simpler to pick up from the start and play and learn. So I would value the new player appeal of the Blue Eyes White Destiny above the Chronicles and the Virtuous, but take nothing away from it. Still very, very appealing. On top of that, with your reprints, you can also take into account the alternative artworks that we did receive, being the Triple Tactics Thrust and Fusion Deployment, Ecclesia and the Fleur-de-Lis. Fusion Deployment is probably one of my favourite alternative artworks ever, since we've got it. Since we've got alternative artworks in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For like 10 to 12 years, and I've been following Yu-Gi-Oh! Since 2002 or 2000 when it first came out, because I bought the original starter deck Yu-Gi. Hands down, probably the best alternative artwork I've seen, which says a lot, considering you've got so many different versions of artworks for Blue Eyes and Dark Magician and everything else in between. That being said, collector value. So not only do you get alternative artworks that might never be reprinted anywhere else because they are so relevant to the Fallen and the Virtuous story arc, which is all there to promote the Chronicles anime, but you also got the ability for them to become Starlight Rares, which will again be unique to this deck. Like, if you are a collector, you can only get those cards in this product. They will never be reprinted in the... Well, I say never. I can't comment on that particularly, but I would be very surprised if those particular alternative artworks ever get reprinted in the future as a Starlight Rare. Like, if that happens, I'll be completely shocked. I think the chances of that are very, very low, and that's what makes it so appealing to a collector. So let's move on to the penultimate product of 2025. So the penultimate product of 2025, following up Fallen and the Virtuous, was Legendary 5Ds, which is incredible because Legendary 5Ds was the first time, no, not the first time, I take that back. It was the first time in a good few years that we received a Legendary deck. And in these Legendary decks, you got 3 ready-to-play decks. Now, they would be ready to play in different scenarios. And what I mean by that one is when you look at Blackwings, they are ready for Time Wizard. If you look at your Black Rose, which also got support in Doom of Dimension, if you put those two together, you had a deck ready to go for Genesis. And then you look at Synchrons, and Synchrons are good to go in Modern. And we've just, as today, at the time of recording this video, received more Synchro support in the future, which now gives us the ability to protect our Junk Speeder, which is insane. So, let's look at the poll, or like the graph. Meta relevance, as the decks themselves are not advanced meta relevance. They were never going to topple the current advanced meta. For Blackwings, it would actually do very, very well in Time Wizard. For Black Rose, if you combine it with Doom of Dimensions, it will do quite well in Genesis, but as it stands on its own, that's not going to happen. That being said, this is where it starts to really peak out. Value for money, insane. You said that I said that the Blue Eyes was good for its reprints. I said the Fallen Virtue was good for the reprints. How about everything? So not only did this set reprint, and this is probably like, whoa, maybe this is close to Battles of Legend for the for reprints in general. For the pure fact that this reprinted Mulchummy Meows, Fualos, and Perulia, all 3 Mulchummies. It reprinted Ash Blossom, Droll Lockbird, Ghost Ogre, Forbidden Droplet, Call by the Grave, Crossout Designator, and I'm pretty sure Effect Veiler as well is in there. Like, its reprints were insane. Probably should be an S tier on its reprints, if I'm being honest, because they were insane. New player appeal, because of said reprints and the fact that you have the options to play different formats. If you're like, I don't like Advanced, I want to play Time Wizard. Or I don't like Advanced, I want to play Genesis. Or I just picked up Doom of Dimensions, I want to be able to play Black Rose. This is a great gateway into getting those. Absolutely insane. Then we look at the last one, collector value. Collector value on this one was a little bit skewed because the only thing you got in here that was unique to a collector would have been the chibi artworks of Stardust Dragon, Blackwind Dragon, Black Rose Dragon, and then the tokens. The issue is for those as a collector, this might be something that you would have to pick up at like maybe £3 for a sealed pack, and then you hold on to those for value, but probably not the best for a collector because it would have been better if they came as a Starlight Rare for each one of those artworks. That wasn't the case, but it was still very, very appealing to a collector. And then the final set of the year as we wrap this up. So, Phantom Revenge, the latest deck building set like Crossover Breaker, came out as the last set of the year. And I'm telling you now, this is not on the same level as the Crossover Breakers as it comes straight out of the box. So when you look at Crossover Breakers, when you look at Justice Hunters, straight out of the box, those decks are incredibly powerful. This is going to be one of them sets that will peak those individual decks, being the Heck Hands, Enneacross, and Cool Tunes, as of their next 2 waves of support. The next wave of support will be getting us in the TCG in about May time, and the second wave of support will probably come around October time. So you do have to wait a decent chunk for them to hit their peaks, but when they hit their peaks, the prices of these decks are going to rocket from what they are now to what they will eventually be. So these are one of the ones that you want to get in at the ground level because that's where it could potentially rocket in value. So, meta relevance. Pretty average, and what I mean by pretty average is a lot of people or a lot of competitive players are picking up Enneacross because it is a very powerful stun style deck, but it's not really denting the top decks. Cool Tunes is the only one of the 3 decks that has actually got a top. They've got a top in a regional at Athens, and they've also got a top in the regional in the UK. It has a lot of potential. It is probably the most junior of all of them, and what I mean by that one is Enneacross have stun cards that they can use to support their strategy. Hecker Hands have Chimera Illusions, Branded, Horrors, Cashteras that they can use to support their factor. The Cool Tunes right now want to utilize more tuner monsters. The best thing they could probably do is play the Ghost Sisters in regards to having those tuner access. Even doing so, their extra is still going to be very, very limited, as a lot of the cards in the game right now, apart from the Cool Tune monsters, don't allow you to synchro summon using 2 tuners. They want 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner. So it needs a lot more support, but it is definitely a summoning mechanic and a summoning style and a play style that hasn't really been that explored in the game right now, and it has the potential to start to branch out to something new. Take a look at Hecker Hands. Hecker Hands are starting to really utilize the abilities of illusion monsters, which is something new that we only got a few years ago. So this is something that illusions are starting to get stronger over time, but unlike spellcasters, dragons that have been here since day dot and day number 1, it's still going to need time to develop. So meta relevance and value for money right now, value for money is worth getting it if you can pick them up cheap enough because they have the most potential to increase in value if the new support is good. Then when we look at reprints, the reprints in this set were pretty average. There wasn't anything too wild or too stapleized. I think, again, that all of the reprint values were left to Blue Eyes White Dragon, Structure Deck, Legendary 5Ds, and Fallen Virtuous, which I have no issue with because those products as general are overall probably the best products to introduce new players, to reprint core staples that everyone is guaranteed to get their hands on, and be very, very kind of appealing to the game state. Then let's look at new player appeal. This is actually quite good for new player appeal for the pure fact that, again, everything you need to play either Cool Tunes, less so Hecker Hands, but you can still play a pure Hecker Hands, and Enneacross are in this set. You can buy this set you can have a ready-to-play near enough Enneacraft deck after 1 or 2 boxes. Cool Tunes will be a little bit more awkward to put together from boxes, but it's still very, very good. Everything in here is where you need it to be. Collector value, quite like Justice Hunters, a lot of the cards came as Ultra Rares, Collector Rares, and then Starlight Rares. So quite like the Justice Hunters, there'll be value in them if you're able to pick up the high rarity cards a little bit cheaper than normal, because then what you can do is you can sell those high rarity cards once they hit their meta peak later on down the line. But as it currently stands right now, the values aren't really topping out. But that is kind of the way where you get the most value, for the pure fact that when decks are at their lowest or before they reach their potential, that's when you can start buying into them. Then when they reach their potential, you sell them off, because once they hit that peak of the potential, it's only going to come down from there. Because Forbidden Unlimited List will check those decks. Forbidden Unlimited List will put those values down for you. And that's when you need to know when to cash in, when to cash out. If you just want to collect high rarity cards, it's actually quite nice, because you've got a lot of options for Starlight Rares, you've got a lot of options for Collector Rares, and if you're like, I want a Master Set, your Master Set's going to look very, very nice. Okay, Breathe. We have been doing this for just over an hour. So, let's go back to what we were looking at. So our criteria for this one, I want to try and put together the products that I think meet each of these criteria the most. So, meta relevance. I think the ones that were meta relevance of the year was Justice Hunters. Like, I think it's a no-brainer. All 3 decks in this were meta relevant. Like, I think this is the best meta relevant set of the entire year. Value for money. I think the best value for money was Fallen and Virtuous. And the reason I say this was the best value for your money is you were paying £20. You were getting 51 cards, all as Ultra Rares. You were getting a deck ready to play. You were getting a promo card, which could be anything from a £2 Secret Rare upgrade all the way to a £120 Starlight Rare upgrade in the form of the Fallen and the Virtuous. So, like, your value of money was insane. And then on top of that as well, you got reprints and alternative artworks. So you got unique artworks. You got reprints of all of the Bestials, which were kind of considered as a hand interaction of choice. And then you got a Nibiru the Primal Being just to top it all off. So I would say Fallen and the Virtuous is probably the best value for money product of all of 2025. Then let's look at reprints and support. Support, I'm going to put it down to Battles of Legend. Now, the reason I'm putting it down to Battles of Legend over everything else is for the pure fact that the support branched a lot more. It gave support to, and very good support to Necros, very good support to Dragomaids, very good support to Orcus. Like, Orcus really did compete from near enough nothing. So did Gem Knights as well. Jirax are very, very good with the Fire Kings. I think overall, for support, Battles of Legend was probably the best product of the entire year. Let's look at reprints. I think the best overall reprints, with just the amount of stuff it reprinted, was Legendary 5Ds. I think Legendary 5Ds gave us so many good reprints. Like I've already mentioned, Perulia, Meows, and Fulos. And then Droplet, Ash, Ogar, Bell, I'm pretty sure was in there as well. Like Imperm, there was so much in this set. It was absolutely insane. So without a shadow of the doubt, I think that's probably the best reprint product of the entire year. New player appeal, I pretty much already mentioned this one. I think the new player appeal is Blue Eyes White Destiny, only because it's dragons. That's already quite appealing to new players anyway. At the time, it was quite meta relevant. It's not as meta relevant now, but it's an ace monster. It's one of the icons of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's one of the decks that will always get support in the future, whether it be massively good or not. The reprints that it received throughout the year made the Primites a little bit more accessible for the deck as well. So it did give you a lot more to work towards. It gave you a lot more to put together. You have so many different varieties of this deck as well, whether you want to be highly competitive, whether you want to shake it up a little bit and be a bit more unique. Like, as a new player coming into the game, you could pick this up, play with just the deck as it is, do well, and then learn to improve. And I think that's also quite important as to why I value this better as a new player appeal than the Fallen and the Virtuous, is that this is a lot more simplistic to learn than Branded. I think Branded have a lot more intricate details, remembering to resolve cards in the end phase and everything else in between. Whereas I think Blue Eyes, not that it's very regimented, because there will be times where you need to adapt your play style and things you need to do, but to kind of learn the basics of a level 8 plus a level 1 tuner makes a synchro 9. Using dragons and spellcasters, targeted effects, destruction effects, non-target, protection effects, everything like that, I think is really, really good. And then the final category is overall collector value. I think for collector's value, the best thing is going to be something along these lines of a quarter century Stampede. And the reason this is going to be high on the collector's value is for the pure fact that it has alternative artworks that come as quarter century secret rares. So you will not see, and I almost guarantee this, you will never see the Cartasia, the Albaz, the Aluba, the Diabell Star, the Labyrinth Lady in that artwork as a quarter century ever again. They will never be reprinted that way. They are unique cards. They will never be reprinted that way. You could arguably say the same about the Battles of Legend Chibis as Starlight Rares, yes. But where the Chibis have a bit of nostalgia, mainly being the Blue Eyes White Dragon, at least with the quarter century Stampedes, it has technical nostalgia or appeal with the branded cards, but it also has nostalgia appeal with the Blue Eyes cards in here, the Dark Magician cards and the Dark Magician Girls. It has competitive value when those decks dip in and out of the format. Like overall, I think this is the best collector set of the entire year. Now, taking a look back at all of the products of 2025, I think they've all been incredibly good. Incredibly good. I think there are some that are better than others. There is no doubt about that in my mind. But overall, it's been a very good balance of the year. I feel that we've definitely peaked at the end of the year because we were spoiled with the Fallen and the Virtuous and Legendary 5Ds. But we also got quite spoiled at the start of the year with Supreme Darkness introducing the Mitsurugis. And on top of that as well, the Blue Eyes White Destiny also giving us nostalgia with Blue Eyes support, but also making Blue Eyes very, very relevant and very, very powerful. So that is it from me on this particular video. I hope this has been informative. Hope it's giving you a bit of a breakdown. I thought it'd be a nice video to do, something a little bit different, taking a look back of all the products we've received in 2025. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm going to be back next week. Hopefully I'll be joined by a couple of supporting guests as well, as we look forward to a potential predictions for Forbidden and Limited List going into 2026. Anyway, thank you so much. This is the last live stream before technical Christmas, so I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas. I will be doing some shout outs throughout the week as well, so don't worry. But as this is the last live stream before that time, I hope you all have a very good time off. I hope you all get to relax very nicely, and I hope you all are enjoyed and blessed on Christmas Day. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.